that clock with the glare, so as long as no one corrects me, it is 7 o'clock. Are we live and ready to go? Thank you. Okay.
7:30 Newfoundland.
Call to order. An adoption of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Thank you. A seconder.
Seconded.
Thank you, Ian. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? We're good to go. We have the consent agenda as appears before you, and the recommendation to follow.
Oh, you're not going to acknowledge these?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should do two things. I need to acknowledge that the Board of Education, that we are on the traditional territories of the Comox First Nations. And I also need to identify that Trustee Janice Payton is not here this evening. She's out of province. So the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Ian. Seconder. Thank you, Peter. All those in favor? And we're good to go. The board did have an in-camera meeting this evening, preceding this one, but I have nothing to report from that. There are no presentations and delegations this evening, so we'll move straight to the Education Committee report. And on behalf of Trustee Payton, Assistant Superintendent Tom Benale.
Thank you. So our last Education Committee meeting was held at Brooklyn. We were treated to an overview of what the Brooklyn staff created for students at the start of the year, which was a different startup than probably we found in the Valley. It was a learning adventure based on the concepts around the Imaginal Learning workshops that have occurred in the district. And what they did is they took the school, divided it into three cohorts: primary cohort, intermediate, and then an upper intermediate. And they looked at Brooklyn, the village. The primary cohort looked at Brooklyn, the present, and the grade 4-5 studied Brooklyn, the past, and 6-7 looked at Brooklyn, the future. Teachers were involved in designing a bunch of learning activities. Students rotated through those activities in their cohort groups, and they had a celebration and report out at the very end. Staff and parents commented that they were very impressed. Many staff commented that it was a wonderful way to start the year. So they are looking at other ways of incorporating the learning adventure into their work at the schools. We're also presented by Mr. Bruce Carlos, District Principal of Aboriginal Education, an overview of current activities and initiatives which are occurring in the Aboriginal Ed Centre, as well as SD71's involvement in supporting the journey towards reconciliation. And this is involvement of staff and programs and things that we're doing here in the district, and those are listed in the minutes for you to see. The last two presentations are tackled a bit of an international flavor. Trustee Coleman presented a video he shared at a session in Oxford, and the video was titled, "Why is SD71 a Good School System?" And Trustee Coleman presented some highlights of conversations with educators from the district, and that information was shared with educators from around the world. So it was nice to see the video. And lastly, two teachers, Doug David and Jay Bridges, attended the Design for Change conference, and they shared project and activities that have occurred in our district, as well as some information from the conference and their interaction at that conference. They really spoke from the heart. They felt they were very grateful for the opportunities they've been given and grateful to pass on those opportunities to the students. Our next Education Committee meeting is Tuesday, the 10th of November, 6:30 to 8:30 at Valley View Elementary.
And it's a public meeting. Thank you. Any questions, comments from trustees? Hearing none. Thank you. We'll move on to district news.
I'd refer the gallery, if they have a package, or for two trustees, to page 13, which is a celebration of the many things that are going on in our school. It's a great time of year in the Valley. This is where our reputation provincially and nationally, probably internationally as well, as a fine arts community is celebrated. And so we're encouraging anyone in the gallery and certainly in the community, if you would like to hear some amazing choir work, please attend the Comox Valley Choir Festival at the Comox Pentecostal Church on Monday, November 16th. That's from 9 to 5. That's where you'll see our high school choirs performing throughout the day. It's just a treat that you forget how beautiful it is that when children sing. There's just something magic about that. This is both a celebratory presentation for them, but also a learning day for them. There will be instruction and adjudication of those choirs, and they get that kind of feedback. And many of them use that feedback as they are participating, and many of them have tours and presentations off the island, over on the mainland, and sometimes outside of the province. And so it's a way for them to get judged and good constructive feedback and learn from that and develop their skills. Again, another fine arts celebration is the Comox Valley Band Festival, and that's where our bands, of course, and we're known in the Valley for our high school bands and our elementary band program. On Tuesday, November 17th and Wednesday, November 18th at the Sid Williams Theatre, our students will be performing there all day in a very similar kind of accredited and adjudicated style. We have some very talented musicians in the Valley, as everyone knows, and it certainly is something that our students look forward to, and as do the bands, that come from other places that actually are on a waiting list to come to this particular festival. So it's very well attended from bands from across the province. Many of you might have participated at your work site on Shakeout BC. We're happy to report that our schools took that very seriously, though there was a fair amount of fun. I saw the pictures from the most inclusive and dramatic whole school participation photo. That was Airport Elementary, won a bit of a prize for that. The schools were involved in emergency preparedness in connection to earthquakes, and I think your children would have come home and talked about it. I hope that they would, and I hope you would encourage them to remember that it's not just a one-day-a-year event. Most often, and I'll say this in this room full of adults, it's not the students that we need to prepare. The students actually take it really seriously, and they get under the desk and they do what they need to do, and the rest of us are a little slow on the uptake. I'm including myself on that as I look at my desk and think, that's going to be ugly, but I get underneath my desk. And so what I say to you is that we have full participation across the district by the staff and by the students, and it's a credit to the work this district does and the attention that we pay to emergency preparedness. I'm sad to report that not all districts have that kind of concentrated energy on emergency preparedness. They don't have a Paul Berry, and we do, and we're very fortunate for that. So I feel comfortable about where we are in terms of the bar for emergency preparedness for our students, particularly in our schools. And finally, just wanted to remind folks that we're at a time of year where our intramurals and our sports programs are well underway. We're in the almost the switch over between fall and winter sports, and if you have any athletes in your midst at your kitchen table, you'll know that particularly at the grade 6-7 level, there's all kinds of sports going on. At the high school, the teams for volleyball are just finishing up, and soccer is just finishing, and basketball is beginning. So we're at a place where we're very fortunate we have coaches in our community, and we have coaches in our schools that step up and provide that extracurricular activity for our students. It's in full bear right now, and it's ready to go. And so we'll be moving into all the winter sports very soon. And that's the end of mine.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the correspondence from the Deputy Minister.
So on page 14, 15, and 16 is a copy of a letter that came from the Minister of Education, Mr. Mike Bernier. He is actually, and he's also works with Deputy Minister Dave Bing, and he's actually the writer of this letter. I was working with the Minister himself. So what you may have heard about 3 weeks ago was the introduction of the idea that there will be 10 hours of non-instructional time built into this year's school calendar. And that non-instructional time, will be used for teachers to become acquainted and to design and to begin to pilot, if they're interested this school year, the new curriculum K-9. So as you're aware, I think through all the press releases, there is a brand new curriculum. In many ways, it's very similar to what your children are experiencing right now. In terms of the knowledge and the data, particularly around literacy and math, your children will be receiving that same knowledge. They will be doing multiplication, and they will be learning algebra. They will be learning to read and write proficiently. More importantly, is the change is about how kids are connected to the curriculum. And it is meant to engage students differently, and it requires teachers to think about teaching and learning differently. And so that requires time for teachers to collaborate together. So we're at a place where the government has put forward 10 hours this year of non-instructional time in the school calendar. They've done the amendment to legislation of Bill 36, which is the legislation that drives the school calendar in the school year. And they're now at a place where we are be working at the district level, all the districts in the province, the teachers, local union president, and myself, on looking at what that plan can look like. I spoke about it at the DPAC meeting last night, and I'm doing my best to represent the notion that we're going to try and be as least disruptive as we can for parents and families to find that 10 hours in a way that makes the most sense. We've had one conversation, the union president and I, we're on the same page about how we might look at doing that, and perhaps giving you I want to give you at least 6 to 8 weeks notice about the dates, and we're looking at something probably that looks like February and perhaps May, so that will give you some time to be organized for those non-instructional times. But the intent of that time, as it says in the letter, and in fact on page 16 sort of lays it out in a little bit of a chart, is that teachers will get together and work collaboratively to design and be ready for full implementation of the new curriculum for September of 2016. And for the grade 10, 11, 12 teachers for whom the curriculum is still in draft next September, they'll be working on responding to the draft as well as becoming aware of what the K-9 curriculum is, so that if they're a science teacher at grade 11, they'll know what has changed for your children in grade 5 and 6 and 7, 8 science as they come to them. So the expectation is that all teachers in our district will be involved in non-instructional time working on curriculum. In front of you, I would say it very possibly will look like another Pro D Day, for example. It might be that 5 hours of those 10, which is virtually a day, could be put together, and it might be in February. And that's the first glance at that new curriculum working together that teachers will have based on this government money. And there may be another one later in the spring after they've done some lesson planning together and worked through that, and we have some final definition from the government about what they need to achieve. So that's this year. So 10 hours in this year. The following year, year 2, 5 hours of non-instructional time, plus one of the already Pro D days that you know will be dedicated to that new curriculum. So 5 hours plus an already existing Pro D day, and in the third year, 5 hours again, and one of the already existing Pro D days. So if you see the phasing, an intense immersion in the new curriculum between now and the end of June, ready for implementation in September. The second year, a review basically of what they've done in the second year, obviously tweaking that and refining that with 5 hours of non-instructional time that they'd be working together, plus one of those Pro D days in that year, again, to continue that work, and the same in year 3. Understanding that the K-9 curriculum then is live and ready to go and will be fully implemented through the 2016 school year, next school year, and the grade 10, 11, 12 curriculum, what we're calling the graduation pathway curriculum, is due to be fully implemented in the 2017 school year. And that's maybe my report on that.
Thank you. Comments or questions from trustees? Hearing none, we'll move on to item C, the long-range facility plan summary report, which you can find on page 19 to 25 in the package. And I'll turn it over to the initial comments to the superintendent.
So I think that just in summary of the long-term facilities plan report, the board's asked me to give just a bit of an overview and a history. The long-term facilities plan was a plan that was done was written by an outside consultant mandated by the Ministry of Education. We had to hire an outside consultant. That was not this board or the previous board. It was the board before. It just towards the end of their mandate. And that person came in, he was a facility expert, and he came in and he looked at our district as was going on across the province and all the other districts. And he looked at both our facilities as they exist today and our ability to sustain those facilities through time. And he was using a 10 to 15 year window. This report is on our website, has been on our website. For those of you that may want to read it, bedtime reading, maybe, if you want to go to sleep. But basically what it did was it looked at our whole district, it looked at our enrollment over time, it made use of our projections of enrollment, and asked us some questions about what they saw. So a consultant's role in that is to look for patterns, to look for anomalies, and ask why this and not that, or why this and how has that been working. And it also, in this case, was to summarize and come up with some recommendations. And there were simply recommendations about what to look at and what to consider. And that's the function of the report. But it's important to remember that it was a facilities report. Right? It wasn't a accredited overview of programming by an educator. It was by a fellow who is an engineer, and it was a facilities report. That report was presented to the board that commissioned it, but to be fair to them, it was at the very tail end of their mandate. The board that came after had a look at that and began to look at the recommendations, and we began to get work on those recommendations. The K-9 campus at Cumberland, for example, came from those recommendations. This board got a chance in their new mandate to have a look at that report, and we are at a place right now where there are some recommendations coming out of that. And what we are here today is to hear, as senior staff, some direction about what we would move to consultation on those recommendations. The recommendations up here on page 21, they are, I'm not sure, I was going to say familiarly called the Phase 5 recommendations towards the top of the page, and they speak to possibilities of things that we could talk about. It literally is a list, a brainstorm list of things that the board may consider to go to consultation on. And I think at that point in time,
Okay.
Trustee Weber, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we have the package and the information before us. We have a recommended motion. Just to remind trustees that our debate is really amongst ourselves, but given that we have a large room and we got people in the back, just to try to ensure that we can be heard. So if you can't hear us at the back, go. Seriously? You answered me. Yeah, that's good. So do try to come in a bit, because I'm guessing that's why you're here, as opposed to what I have to report back on at the end of the agenda. So come on in. So we will do our best to be loud and clear. Before we get into seeing whether somebody will move the motion, I do want to remind trustees, as articulated by the superintendent, that this isn't a debate this evening about the merits of whether the board will or won't do the items that are listed in Phase 5. It really is simply a question about, are they items that we want to engage in conversations with the public, inclusive of our partner groups, parents, etc. So I say that way because I will sort of use the out of order notion if I get a sense that the conversation is getting too much into the specifics about whether the board should or shouldn't be doing something, because that's not the intent of the discussion this evening. Arguably hugely premature, given that there haven't been any conversations on that. So I will stop at that point and then open it to trustees to see if anybody would like to recommend the motion.
I'll move the motion.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Peter, would you like to start for discussion?
Yeah, and the part of the I'm having some difficulty with the Phase 5 cluster because they are. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Because there are some things that anyone, I think, can look at and pretty much understand what's being said. But there are others that are much more complicated, and obviously, given that I'm the COMOX trustee, the ones that are, for me, particularly complicated are the ones about the French immersion on the east side, right? And what I really need, and I hope we will have these as the consultation starts, is some very good numbers about which schools and which students will be affected, and how many in each school and so on. Because it's a very complicated package, and I can't say that looking at what we have right now, I really understand it very well at all.
So,
So I'm assuming that the administration will provide us with a very detailed package as the consultation starts, so that we can take the full information to our school, the affected schools.
I think that the board needs to assume the administration will provide us with any information that we ask for as part of the process, which may be information that we identify, and clearly would also be, presupposing we move forward with any one or all of these that is identified through our consultation. Sheila.
So, I am very concerned that the motion, the recommended motion that you presented is, in my view, it ranks as an omnibus motion, and as we know, people don't like that very much. There's quite a lot packed in it in number 5, and I think that our discussion, even as to whether we want to move forward on all or parts of that, need us to break up that motion and to take. I see it breaking into 3, which I prepared an extensive document, and I'm sure you don't want me to read it, but I will speak to parts of it. I think we do want to consult, obviously. And one of these consultations is about changes to the French immersion program and the implications of where students would then be placed in buildings. There's a significant area around the secondary programming challenges and those boundaries. The type of consultation that we do is really important. And we have said that we want community engagement and that we care about relationships. We can do those consultations in a very positive way. And I think we could have taken another approach than to have them spring out of the facilities plan in terms of discussing them earlier with people. But I think we can do good consultations around those ones. And I would be prepared to support a motion that we accept in principle the recommendations set out in points 1, 7, 8, and 9, and that we identify the consultation process around those 2. The points 2 to 6 relating to the west side, to Pond Ridge, to Lake Trail, are currently set up from the starting point of a closure process. It's a very different type of consultation. It has many, many implications. And I would like to separate that so that we can talk about whether we want to proceed with that particular step in that particular format, separate from these others. And in fact, because I know from the Comox side that the French immersion and the questions of dual or single track questions of boundary are very important there, that I think right now at this point we should separate the 3 large topics into separate motions. And the motion would be we accept the principle to look at the dual track, we accept the principle to look at the secondary boundaries, and that I would propose not accept a closure process, but that we do engage in consultation. So I'm wondering whether there would be support from the rest of the board either to withdraw that motion and go to one that separates these very significant items so that we can, as a board, you're asking, are we giving direction? At present, the motion asks us to give direction on all of them at once or vote it down altogether. I think we would make more progress if we took the key areas together. I feel like phase 5 phase 5 is fine to say these number of things need to go forward at one time, we can work on them. But to present a single motion on all of them really takes away our capacity to have a good conversation about them. just have a good conversation about whether or not we feel it's the right time to do these in this way. I'm hoping that you will agree. I certainly can't support the motion as it stands right now as an omnibus blanket. We support all of these processes and we have no discussion. We don't have really clear discussion right now about the individual elements of them. So can I make an amendment? Can we ask for that motion to be withdrawn and start with one at a time?
Well, you can certainly make an amendment, and then we would have to then
I know, we'd
debate
have
the
to vote
amendment.
on the amendment.
And that's fine.
We could amend the amendment.
That's fine. Well, hopefully, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you want to proceed with that at this point, or do you want an opportunity to hear from other trustees?
Sure.
We can-
If people are prepared to vote on them all at once, but I certainly think
No, it
that-
doesn't,
Yeah.
it will not negate your opportunity
Yeah.
to bring
Okay.
forward
Yeah.
an amendment for discussion. So it's just a sequencing thing.
I think
Okay?
that's fair enough, yeah.
Before I go back to you, because you started, Trustee Bolt or Brown or Hargraves, comments?
I understand that it's a lot to absorb for people who haven't been talking about it for a long time. I think judging by the number of people that have appeared here today, when normally we have 3 or 4, that it's obviously struck chords, and I think because of that, it's vital that we move forward with consultation on all these aspects of the plan. The plan has been in process for 2 terms now, as I understand, and it's time to take the next step, and I think it's really important that we do proper consultation on all of these separate issues, and I think we're capable of doing that. And yeah, so.
Well, just been introduced to a new term ad seriatim, which means voting on things one at a time. And I think that's possible after this is passed, that we go through and see what is our priorities and whether or not any of these can be put to the side afterwards, dealt with later, or whatever. But I think given that we've had 3 boards look at this, it's moved this direction, and there's things within Phase 5, such as the secondary question, which comes out of one of the concerns that right from the moment I was elected, I was receiving emails from different individuals who were concerned about the fact that their students or their children could not get programs or classes that they needed. And the secondary, looking at that, trying to address it, this was one of the ways that was ferreted out, is how we could address whether or not there is a critical mass in order to offer a class for a student to go to. In some of the secondary schools, there isn't that critical mass, so the program can't be offered. This is we're looking at this as being a way of addressing that. There's other things in here. The difference in programming between one school and another, where you have one school that's all one stream and another school that's 2 stream. There's discrepancies then in programs across the district. This is another way of looking at that and perhaps addressing it. And I think ultimately we want to have a conversation with the community about education in this district. Where is it going? What's happening? And what does it mean? What's going to occur from from this, and why this? Why are we going with this? Why is this necessary? And unless we pass all of it and go for it, I don't think we'll ever get to that conversation. I think it'll be piecemealed out by people that will want to deal with, I'm only interested in this little bailiwick, I'm only interested in French immersion, and I really don't care whether or not secondary. And that, I think, breaks down what we are hoping to see happen or needing to see change in the district or two.
Thank you. Cliff?
I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendation so that after, in the second line, after the words Phase 5, you add the words set out in points 1, 7, 8, and 9.
I'll second that.
1, 7, 8, and 9.
1, 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, the real critical person in this is you, Deb, to make sure you've got this. So please don't let us proceed, because we'll be coming back to you lots, I think, in terms of what our language is. So they're recommended, and it's moved and seconded. Now reads.
Set out in 1,
No,
7,
like-
8, and 9.
So read the whole thing, though. I think it's important.
Isn't it just the amendment?
Yeah, it is, but I think just in the context of what
So you want the whole?
I want the whole thing. I know we're just going to be discussing the amendment, but just for crystal clarity.
Board of Education, Committee for 71, approving the school recommendations set out in Phase 5, set out in 1, 7, 8, and 9 of the October 27, 2015 Long-Range Facility Plan Summary for distribution and consultation in accordance with Board Policy 3-2 and Regulation 3-2R1 commencing November 1st, 2015.
Thank you. So what we're going to now be discussing is the amendment to the motion. So to set out at 1789.
And speaking to the amendment, I'm glad you used the word omnibus. There is a whole bunch thrown in here, and Trustee Hargreaves is right. We should probably be dealing with these, one at a time, and this amendment does just that, I think. And we will then, it narrows things down and leaves us. The secondary issue, the dual programs, and the school closures issues be dealt with in seriatim. I see this, the recommendation, the way if it was passed that way, we're talking about closing 3 schools. Puntledge for sure, Lake Trail as a middle school, and moving everything from Puntledge to Lake Trail, and Rob Road, changing it from its current status to a dual track status. And
So I
that's
just need to
an
be-
awful lot to put it together into one omnibus motion.
So as my earlier comments at the outset, this is not about whether the board will be closing school. This is to speak to process. The board, as board members know, that we are required by legislation to identify any conversations around school closure as a school closure process. It's not a school closure process and we will close schools. It's a close school closure process.
You're reading stuff into my words that were not intended.
Okay, thank you. I just want for clarification. Further conversation on the amendment. Peter.
Well,
Sorry,
I really don't think we can defer some parts of this, if only because we have a tight timeline here with respect to budget. At some point or another, we have to do the budget consultation as well, and we really need this stuff to be resolved to make any sense of the budget consultation process whatsoever. So I really don't think we can defer any parts of this. I do agree that they're very different kinds of consultation, though. The one about school closure is, as the chair has already reminded us, it's a statutory process. We don't control the process, or at least not the dimensions of the process. But I think we do have to have very different kinds of consultation because there's very different kinds of problems here. Balancing secondary school populations is I say it's a relatively straightforward thing. Changing immersion populations is a very complicated thing. So I think we have to have very different consultations, but I really don't think we can defer parts of this, if only because of our budget crisis.
Okay, Vicki?
So I think that the reason that there's all those points in Phase 5 is that they all feed into each other. So separating them out into different conversations will complicate the conversation, because if one impacts another, impacts another, impacts another, and that's why they're clumped together like that. I'm not sure omnibus is the right term for it. As was mentioned already, there is a process that is prescribed for us for school closure, and should we enter a conversation about a school that ends in we need to close the school, then I'm pretty sure we're out of line with that, and we can't do that. And then we're coming into a school closure process with an opinion already, whereas what we're intended to do is to come open-minded into a school closure process. And so they all feed each other. That's why they're together. And that's why we want to talk to all of you and everyone else about all those separate issues.
Sheila?
Okay, well, I am actually trying to facilitate us moving forward with this without too much of a fight, just on this piece. It's not my intention, Peter, that we would defer the other points. It's simply that I believe they really merit separate discussion. I agree that they are somehow interwoven, and that itself is a topic for some discussion. But it will facilitate us if we could agree to this amendment and commit to that. And we still need to actually have a little more discussion probably on that one. I don't know. But I even take, Peter, what you're saying as support for this motion. You said that they are complicated and very different. You don't want to defer them. I assure you that it is my intention to bring forward another motion about the other remaining points. But that because they are so different, our discussion now would be facilitated by simply accepting those ones that do not have the closure element in them, agreeing to do consultation on them, see where it will go. It does apply, it does intersect with budget, it does intersect with many other things around programming. We can approve that. If we don't do that, and we go back to the original motion, then I probably am going to read the whole thing. And because my rationale for rejecting or for offering an other version of what the motion for points 2 to 6 might be is fairly extensive, but I believe an important one to make. So I'm asking now that, in my view, we can actually facilitate moving forward on all of Phase 5 if we separate the two very different processes right now. And then we talk about them on their own merits.
Is there any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, so on the amendment, and again, read just the amendment, please.
Set out in Phase 5, 1, 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, and just for clarity, because in the actual document, there's no point. They're not numeric, so we have, for discussion purposes, we're clear that bullet 1 is number 1. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, and that's defeated. So we're back to the recommended motion on the floor. Any further? Peter?
Okay. Well, it's clear to me that we're going to have very different conversations with very different groups of people on the various parts of this. And so I vote against the amendment because I don't see how that facilitates the consultation. The consultation has to be in separate chunks anyway. And we need different packets of information for each separate phase of the consultation. We're going to be talking to different people about quite different topics. That's well understood, I think. And we are, as I understand it, we're going to have an external facilitator who will manage each of the separate phases of the consultation. That's true, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I see, I only see essentially one issue here. How do we proceed to get a good consultation process going? And that, I think, is not implicit in this document. The document gives us some things to look at, and we, in my opinion, during the consultation process, we critique the proposals. We hope we can generate better proposals that are less disturbing to fewer people. We come up, hopefully, with alternatives, but within the timeline. And I keep insisting on the timeline, because if we don't get this solved by the end of March, the budget process is going to be it's going to be a nightmare anyway. It's going to be a nightmare quadrupled if we can't get this resolved.
Trustee Bull?
Trustees will be familiar with this argument, but the elephant in the room is the provincial government and the Ministry of Education. And Trustee Coleman made the point that that what we're doing is we're dancing to the tune of the Ministry of Education and the whatever is in the School Act. And I, for one, am getting really, really tired of us having to dance to their tune, to the total disregard of what other people in the community might think. And trustees are becoming the meat in the sandwich. And to go with this motion the way it is right now, a lot is being read into what was in that motion, and we should be looking at how are we going to do some of this kind of stuff, and that should be well in advance. We don't even have a plan on that. But because the Ministry of Education is tugging at the strings, we're going to jump to that tune, and I'm getting fed up with that.
Sheila?
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a little indulgence, okay, around the time.
So, board procedural bylaws, you have 5 minutes. And I really don't want to watch the clock, but...
All right, so I find it impossible to support the entire package, and it really comes down to the section in Phase 5 about it going directly to the recommendation that there be a closure process for a call Huntledge Park and a move to Lake Trail. I think the recommendation in the facilities plan, and it even goes back before that during configuration and the reconfiguration, was to review existing and proposed educational programs at Lake Trail Junior Secondary and look to maximizing opportunities. It's a big leap from a recommendation, the mandate given to senior staff to pursue the facilities plan. It's a huge leap to go from review educational programming to close a school as a starting point. And I feel that the community in that area on the west side have been asking repeatedly for 5 or more years for a review of the education their kids are
So
getting.
I'm just going to need to stop you.
Yeah.
Because you're making, how I'm hearing it,
Yeah.
I just want to clarify for
Yeah.
the board, you're making a definitive statement about a school will be closed. That is not what
Okay.
that's not what's being, so it's really important,
Yes.
regardless of how the
Yeah.
vote on this motion goes, that as we move forward, that there's clarity
Yes.
that this is around if
Yes.
it moves forward, the
Okay.
necessity of following the statute
Absolutely.
to allow for the conversation, with at the end of which
Yes.
we'll all be back
Yeah.
here. This room will be filled with even more people, and we will then make the
All right.
decision.
But Tom, I do believe, having gone through some closure processes versus the consultation of Cumberland, for instance, that it was just about how do we build this great new community, what do we want to do? There is a significant difference. We cannot pretend that people are not cynical and skeptical about a closure process. And I just heard Trustee Coleman say that this process needs to move forward because it will have implications on our budget, which suggests that the main reason for closing Lake Trail being saving money is actually of more importance to the budget and needs to be taken care of. If that doesn't sound like a predetermined decision to me, I don't know what would. So it is very touchy. Where I'm trying to go with this is that there has been a commitment to, or a recommendation, and it's repeated many, many other times, that we look at the west side. That process has not been done. Now, it's true that we could do that process through the closure. It is quite true. But I think then that it is important that the language not be a closure of Puntledge, but it's a closure of Lake Trail. And I believe that this is an implication for parents whose kids are currently at Puntledge School, because unless they're in French immersion, they will at some point be going to Lake Trail. There are merits to the small school or the big school. There's research on are large cohorts necessary. They'll get addressed in the consultation about school secondary boundaries. They will come up. But there are some assumptions being made about the value of that programming that have not been explored. And I think we are on very dangerous ground when we say when we support a recommendation that is about a closure of École Puntledge. That closure process then will look at, will this school be better at this school or that school? What else could we do with it? And it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. In a sense, the elementary program will remain. This recommendation is not about the closure of Puntledge School per se. It is about the elimination of current programming for children in 7, 8, 9, possibly 10. And that discussion has to be the focus. I will remind the board the district was taken to court over the closure of Brooklyn Elementary and proposed move to Cape Lazo. The elimination of the middle school at Cape Lazo was considered a significant change, and the district was directed to consult with the Cape Lazo community directly and specifically on the change. The ruling referred to our closure process as a sham. I think we would be wise to avoid a repeat of this income and ensure that of this outcome, we do robust consultation directly on the future of Lake Trail, and do not pretend it will be open when it will in essence be eliminated. Now, we could do that again if we had separated these two major areas. We might, and even now, we can amend it so that instead of saying the recommendation is to close Puntledge, that the recommendation would be to do a closure on Lake Trail and or Puntledge, if that speeds the process up. But if we do not do the closure on Lake Trail, it is not enough to say, oh, it will come up in the course of this one. It will not be a robust exploration, and it will not meet the test that we need to meet. So that's a big part of my objection to moving into this, and why I had hoped we would just separate the two.
Okay. Thank you. So
okay.
We're at 6 minutes. Do you have any final comments?
Final comments are that these things are interlinked. But what really concerns me is that the reasons for proposing closure of a school on the west side are about addressing low enrollment issues in senior grades at Highland, and this cascading down of filling it up. Whenever you solve one problem, if you create the cost, if you offset it, that's the tragedy of the commons, isn't it? Someone else pays the price. So we have issues of enrollment at Highland that we plan. Okay. Yes, fine. I'm taking Cliff's time. So
Good try. Good try.
We have budgetary problems. We are looking at substantial savings, some of it offset by busing. But we have got to, so we are driving decisions around educational programming by our budgetary constraints. I want us to look for those budgetary savings then in ways where all the pain is equally distributed. You know I am enthusiastic about pursuing the 4-day week for that very reason. It will save more money, and
It would be an excellent part to contribute to the consultation.
it will, and it shares the pain. We are looking once again at the children of the west side, at Puntledge, at Lake Trail, at the future students coming from Puntledge to Lake Trail, to take the hit for everybody else. I find that unacceptable when we have not done over 6 years, have not looked at the needs of that vulnerable population, about the opportunities that asset presents to us. So, yes, we can vote in favor of this consultation. We will be in trouble with its current language.
Thank you. Vicki, did you have your hand up? Any final comments?
My only final comment is what I like is the passion with which my fellow trustee speaks, and that's what I want to see come from the community. And I don't think that if we drop this stuff out for safety's sake or for, anything else, that we will get that kind of conversation. People will go away and say, oh, well, that's good. They're not going to do anything about this, so I don't have to pay any attention to it. I think that this provides us with that opportunity to get the passion from the community as well, to hear your feelings, to hear the feelings of the parents and the students and the staff at Lake Trail, Cumberland Elementary, Cumberland Community, Arden, everywhere, about the state of education in this province and in this district.
Okay. Thank you. So on the motion that's before the board, in its original state as there, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you. We'll go on to board committee reports. So again, folks, you're very welcome to stay right to the end. There is a question. If you have questions, by all means stay until the end. But if you came just for this, no hard feelings if you choose to leave at this point. That's a neutral comment. Board committee reports from the Finance Committee. Trustee Coleman.
Yeah, the essential bit of business from us is the capital plan submission. In the minutes, and the actual submission is
On the agenda.
on the
The annual
agenda.
facilities grant?
No. It's a later agenda item for the capital plan.
Yes. So we're going to start off with item B, which is the 2015-2016 annual facilities grant capital project. Bylaw number 126876.
Okay.
Right, Mr. Chairman, inside your package is the bylaw. This is an annual bylaw the board is required to pass so that we can get access to the capital component of our annual facility grant, the 4 normal motions that you see for bylaws. So this would be referred to as a capital project bylaw 126876, 2015-16 annual facility grant, a bylaw of the Board of Education of School District Number 7 to adopt a capital bylaw in the amount of $1,430,165.
See the recommendation, so we need to be...
I'll move that School District 71, Comox Valley 2015-2016 annual facilities grant bylaw number 126876 in the amount of $1,430,165 receive its first reading.
And a seconder? Trustee Brown, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
I just don't care
Did the second.
right now.
All right.
I mean, it's not as important to me as educational programs. I'm
So,
afraid.
so that is carried.
I move that School District 71, Comox Valley 2015-2016 annual facilities grant bylaw number 126876 in the amount of $1,430,165. Receive its second reading.
The seconder, Trustee Brown, thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. The third reading requires, or not the third reading, but this one requires unanimous consent to move on to the final reading.
That the board unanimously agree to suspend the requirements of the School Act and the Board Procedural Bylaw 2015 to have the third and final reading of the 2015-2016 Annual Facilities Grant Bylaw number 126876 at a subsequent meeting.
And the seconder, Trustee Brown, thank you. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously, thank you. And then finally,
That School District number 71, Comox Valley 2015-2016 Annual Facilities Grant Bylaw number 126876 in the amount of $1,430,165. Receive its third and final reading.
the seconder, Trustee Brown, thank you. And all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move to the capital plan submission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Inside your package is a two-page document that provides a summary of our 5-year capital plan submission required to submit to the Ministry of Education. A slight change this year than previous years. The government had announced in, I think it was late August, that boards were required to submit a routine capital request by September 15th, and then to incorporate the routine items into our capital plan submission that gets a board approval at this meeting. So in total, we have a capital request of approximately $8.5 million. The number one project priority we have is the seismic upgrade for Courtney Elementary. The second priority is a $800,000 mechanical upgrade at Royston, and the third priority is a Lake Trail Secondary School seismic upgrade as well. The smaller dollar amounts that you're seeing on the list are the routine capital items that we did submit, and we have yet to hear from the government which of those projects are going to be approved. We're hoping that it'll come out next week, so we'll be able to report at the subsequent meeting. So there's a recommended motion in there for approval, and then we would be able to submit the capital plan.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. The seconder? Trustee Bolt, thank you very much.
Can I say it seems like a very tedious business doing this stuff, but please look at the details of what is contained in that capital plan. Very many students in this district will be better housed and more safely housed as a consequence of this plan if it gets accepted by the ministry.
I had a question about the last item. What's a DDC replacement?
A DDC is a digital data controls that run our heating and ventilation systems. So the DDCs make us more efficient and we're save utility costs and consumption.
Is it based, like, if you want the hot water on the weekend, you have to get an override from Calgary or something like that?
That's not this. It does allow us to turn lights on and heaters off and all that kind of stuff on a time schedule.
Okay, so the motion's before you. It's been seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Move on to board business, the Go Smart Committee. If you want to...
Yes. Yes, please.
Mr. Hesselgrave in the back.
Okay, thank you. The original proposed Smart Integrated Transportation Committee is for the board to have an appointed member to this committee. It's a multi-jurisdictional city, Courtney Town, Comox, Village of Cumberland, and the school district is invited. It's an excellent opportunity. The focus is on improving means to get around the community through your own locomotion. So let's improve our walking trails and our biking trails. And it's used to be a committee that just ran without terms of reference or full support of the respective councils. And it's been formalized so that we would be a voting member at the table in this. And it's an excellent deal for the school district. We get a vote at the table, but we're not involved in expending funds. We're there to help guide the process around how would we best be served by having improved cycling and walking routes. So it's an excellent opportunity for us to participate in that, and it dovetails perfectly with our active travel program, and I would highly recommend that we do further.
Okay, I have the recommendation before us. Yes, Sheila, you would like to make this
I'd
recommendation?
love to
I know
make
you
this
would, so
recommendation,
please
yes,
do.
thank you. I've been the liaison person, and I would recommend that we, what do I need to recommend? That we adopt, endorse.
The Board of
endorse.
Education endorsed the final terms of the reference for the Go Smart Integrated Transportation.
Right.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Burrows. Any discussion?
Can I just,
Please.
well, this committee, there was, it grew out of the municipalities having a cycling task force, and I think that this committee represents an expansion of that mandate, and technically it's called the Integrated Transportation Committee, but we thought Go Smart sounded a little better, and it's about inclusiveness, and I know that the school board's participation in active travel had a role in bringing those interests of walking and the all-age access through, and it's been a very successful thing all of the municipalities are on, and the committee recently, or the project recently has been selected by BC Healthy Communities for to have a video made about the success of the program as an example of successful collaboration between municipal and bodies and other groups. So there'll be somebody coming in November to make a short video about this little project, which just turned out to be a really successful example, and it'll be shared with other BC communities about how you can really make progress working together.
Okay. So we have the recommendation before you. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Move on to Board Procedural Bylaw 2015-2. Secretary Treasurer Horsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last meeting, I believe we were requested to bring forward an amendment to the procedural bylaw 2015. The amendment was to incorporate school trustee written reports into the agenda. So to do that requires an amendment to our procedural bylaw. So as you scroll down, you'll find on page 1 that there is an introduction of a definition of written reports. So this shall be, it's defined as shall be written reports voluntarily provided by a trustee to be included in the regular board meeting agenda that highlights their activities on behalf of the board since the last report. The content of trustee written reports shall be limited to the mandate of the Board of Education. Each trustee shall speak to their written reports for a maximum of 2 minutes. And then if you scroll down onto the bottom of page 3, you'll see an amendment to a recommended amendment to the order of business, which lays out how we establish our agenda. So a couple of things are happening here. One, we're incorporating the Education Committee as a standalone agenda item, removing the collaborative engagement and regenerative discussion dialogue section. And down below, before the public question period, is where we're including the school trustee written report. So the amendment is a slight amendment to the collaborative engagement, and then to incorporate the trustee written reports into the procedural bylaw. So because we've already amended this bylaw in 2015, it would be titled 2015-2.
Thank you. So you have the recommendation before you.
So I move it.
So Jan, can you read? You need to read it out if you have there. If you don't, I can do that, not a problem.
That the School District 71 Comox Valley Board Procedural Bylaw 2015-2 receive its first reading.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Brown. Discussion? Sheila?
I'm just interested in the placement of it so far to the end. I know sometimes in the past we've had the reports from trustees earlier, and sometimes it is generating or providing information that might be of interest in the discussions, depending on what trustees have been to. I guess it's not that big an issue, but I am interested in your conversations about why it was placed there. It's often so. I mean, the model was from, say, Courtney Council, where it's something that comes in pretty early in the agenda as a kind of a check-in almost.
Well, to some degree, it was somewhat arbitrary, but based on looking at what other school districts have, and as we talked last month, there are other school districts who avoid this particular item like the plague because of the challenge of managing it, and others that have it at different. So the product placement is in different spots in the agenda. My interest in, and we'll be happy to support this, is as with anything, we test drive it, and if it doesn't work for us, then we can adjust. And I think that's the principle that this board has and will continue to operate under.
I'm impressed at how much bureaucratic procedures we've had to go through just to put a simple little thing like this on a board agenda. And if we do test drive it and we find that, there's a clunk in the rear end, are we going to have to go through a whole new business of a bylaw amendment and so on? And who sets up the rules that we have to do this kind of stuff?
Well, so the answer is yes to the first part, and the answer is the board to the second part. I mean, we're the ones who set the bylaws for ourselves, and perhaps I'm the wrong person to speak to it currently sitting in this seat. The board chair benefits from having a procedural bylaw to rely on and to make defendable decisions in rulings. Otherwise, it becomes potentially quite a freestyling adventure, which neither you or I want.
I'm not speaking against it. I just have a hard time figuring out what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that I went to the DPAC last night and listened to these guys talk for 2 hours, actually. But that's what I did. So
I think the intent, when it was brought forward, was introduced by Trustee Bolt, was to provide an opportunity that currently doesn't exist for trustees if they have something.
So I can say...
No, there's no roll call. There's no place if you have something. And so I would like to think that as part of your 2 minutes, if you choose to use it, you're judicious in ensuring that it has...
I didn't mean to imply it wasn't worth listening to. It was.
Okay, so on the Peter's used up his 2 minutes. All right. So on the first motion, all those in favor? Sorry, the first reading. Thank you. That's carried. Second reading.
Move both that School District 71 Comox Valley Board Procedural Bylaw 2015-2 receive its second reading.
Sheila, thank you. As a seconder, any discussion?
Just that if all this passes, so I'll also have a little chart over there, and every trustee's name there, and Trustee Coleman would earn a gold star. What I did last night.
Okay. So on the second reading, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Bolt moves that the board unanimously agree to suspend the requirements of the School Act, and I can't help but laugh at it, and the board's procedural bylaws 2015 to have the third and final reading of the board's procedural bylaw 2015-2 at a subsequent meeting.
And I'd really like to throw this right into...
So all this is...
not voting
so
for
this requires unanimous consent, so all those in favor?
Don't be a meanie.
Okay. So, all kidding aside, and certainly appreciate the awkwardness of sometimes doing this third reading, it really is designed purely as a safeguard to procedure so that boards do not rush through willy-nilly, and hence it needs to be a unanimous decision. And certainly there have been times around other discussions where it hasn't received unanimous decision, and all that means it gets bumped to the next board meeting for a final, as a motion to be discussed and debated then and voted on. So,
Bolt moves that the School District 71 Comox Valley Board Procedural Bylaw 2015-2 receive its third and final reading.
Thank you, seconder. Thank you, Sheila. All those in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. So the last three items, some weird coincidence, are mine. The board strategic plan brochure, as has been talked about at the board table in September. The board met at the end of August to work on its strategic plan. At the September board meeting, there was a commitment that we would have that plan ready for distribution at this public meeting, and we do. We have some copies available. They kind of look like this, and we will be sharing them with, at this point, with our partner groups. The reason I say partner groups and the reason I say we have limited copies that we printed, it's still a bit of a mock-up. We still have some publishing, formatting things that we need to sort out, but from a content standpoint, it's ready to go. It can, sooner rather than later, I don't know if the superintendent can advise when this can be put on the on our website.
We were waiting for you to say yes tomorrow morning.
Yes, and it's good to go. So I'm certainly very appreciative of the efforts put in by my colleagues to put together the board's strategic plan. It really identifies in black and white what the public ought to hold us accountable to. The next item is the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association. That meeting took place October 2nd and 3rd. I had the opportunity, wearing my day job hat, to be part of a presentation with a representative from Island Health and a representative from the Sanders School District, my day job being with the Ministry of Children and Family Development, to do an in-service presentation on child, youth, and mental health substance use activities on Vancouver Island and how they relate to the school districts. Perhaps I'm biased. I thought the presentation was well received and garnered a fair amount of conversation and good stimulating discussion and some pointed questions. So information that was shared has gone out to all of the school districts on Vancouver Island. And last but not least, last Wednesday, October 21st, and not listed there, October 22nd, I attended two sets of meetings. One was, the 22nd was a joint meeting identified as the first annual liaison meeting, and that was inclusive of board chairs, secretary treasurers, and superintendents from across the province. Well-attended event. We spent a significant amount of time talking about curriculum implementation, frameworks for enhancing student learning, and financial accountability reviews. There was also an information session provided on update on capital and seismic programs, and there is material that is being pulled together. I noticed just on my email that some is already being sent out, and that will be distributed to trustees, and I quite frankly don't see any reason why it could not be tagged to our website as well, should folks be interested. Following that, on the next day, there was a BCSTA board chairs meeting. Again, information that will come from that, which will also be distributed to trustees, my colleagues here, as well as posted on the website for those who are interested in reviewing such material. That day was a working session and a learning session to deal with conflict of interest scenarios that face boards, conflict resolution and board teamwork that often are challenging to boards, and also we had a gentleman by the name of Scott Sutherland, a former reporter for a number of news outlets, as well as working for the Ministry of Education, their communications branch, providing board chairs with some useful information on how to engage with the media. So I will provide that as well. So I ran through all those very quickly. Are there any questions on any one of those three?
Just wanted to comment on that session at the Vancouver Island School Trustees Association. I was very impressed with the structure and the process that deals with the mental health of children and youth. And it's going to be a subject for one of our education meetings later on this year. And Esther Schatz, I think, is directly involved in some aspect of that. And encourage people in the gallery, when you hear about that one, it's going to be a dandy. It's going to be a real good one that really affects teachers and parents a whole lot.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to public question period and spend a bit of time on that. Again, for those new to the room, which, as noted earlier by Trustee Brown, is pretty well everybody except a handful. It really is designed as question period as opposed to statement period. I will do my best to answer them. If I don't have an answer, I'll declare that as opposed to making one up, and we'll undertake to get back to you. So I usually start out with the media, and I can't tell if the media is back there. Any questions?
Can I defer to the end of the public consultation period?
You can indeed. And then to our partner groups.
I think it's a process question, actually. The way that the recommendations for the facility, the long-range facility plan, the way they came up, was it that management did that, and then the board now is voting on that? So I asked that question because I found it a bit weird, troubling that there was trustees that moved the motion, but they didn't really understand what they were moving. In fact, when Trustee Coleman moved it, he spoke about all his concerns for it. Normally, when someone moves a motion, they're for it. So I was just wondering what the process was for how that came about.
The process was the long-range facilities plan created by as required by and as mentioned by the superintendent. And with that, the board seizes senior management with the responsibility of coming forward, and the product of that is this evening.
That had been discussed
And had been
previously
discussed.
at many other meetings.
Yeah, so Dave Gillis, DPAC Chair. Just a really quick note to thank the support that DPAC does get in this whole process, because it is very important that DPAC continues in the role that it is. But my question is, now that you've voted on this motion about the long-range facility plan and the direction in Phase 5, what process do you have in place now to actually start communicating the consultation process that is needing to take place? Because obviously we have a whole group of parents here. They're really eager to find out what's happening. What are we doing at this point?
I can answer that. So prior to the board, on last Friday, when the board agenda came out, prior to it coming out, we had gotten hold of all the PAC chairs of the schools that were involved, so that it wasn't they weren't blindsided, there wasn't a big surprise, and let them know that we'd be building a consultation process, depending on what the board's direction was, if they were going for one of these, two of them, five of them, the whole package, that we would be, because we couldn't predict at that point in time, that we would be working directly with the PAC chairs. That's our intent, to develop a consultation process for that school community. And we would be taking advice and feedback from the parents and staff at that school about how to reach as many parents as we can. We talked with the PAC chairs about providing many ways for folks to both get information and provide feedback. Some folks like to come to meetings. Some folks like to read something and then give online feedback. That way, in the case of the secondary boundary changes, we are providing students with a place for feedback, and that'll be online, as opposed to bring them all down to the gymnasium and give them information and then ask them if they have any questions. That's not usually been an effective tool for secondary kids. But what we'll do starting tomorrow, there's a letter that will go home to the schools that are affected that speaks to the beginning of a consultation process. The fact that we'll have a button on our website that's about the long-term facilities report consultation process. It'll be signaled off to the various issues. So, for example, Copontledge Park, and there will be everything that is about that consultation process will be on that website. So we will start that ball rolling, and I signaled with the PAC chairs when I spoke with them, the ones that I spoke with on Friday, Alan Douglas spoke with some, and so did Tom DeMeo, and that we would start that process tomorrow, talking with the schools, the administration, the staff, and the parents.
So to further that, and it just builds on some of the conversation that happened here, and certainly the point that Trustee Coleman made about these are complicated matters, and there's a whole lot of information that it needs. So it is clear to the board, I hope, that we need to provide a significant amount of information before we even engage in the conversation around the question, because otherwise people aren't dealing either strictly just from emotion or not from the data. What we also undertake is that is to very clearly on our website or through the links that we have, identify the answers that are given to the questions asked. Often one person, we don't want to get trapped where a person or a cohort of people ask a question, they get an answer, and nobody else knows. So we want to be able to manage that in a way that everybody has the same amount of information. Yes, thank you.
It says in Appendix A under the consultation process that it's recommended that an external consultant will be brought in to help manage this process. So was there any criteria around how, when, like what I heard about the consultation, but are you planning on bringing in an external?
Yes.
And what is the criteria for finding that consultant? Do we know that?
So I'll speak to the logic for it first. This is not a process that the board leads or the superintendent. This is we are to be part of it, to learn and to hear and to evaluate. So doing both, sort of providing stewardship for it, would put any board member in an awkward position, and arguably superintendent or secretary treasurer or somebody. So, have we nailed down in not being able to predetermine the outcome of tonight exactly what the criteria is? We haven't nailed that down, but we have used consultants and facilitators in the past. So,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. Based on discussion, the reason I'm asking is I've not had a chance to really look at it. The website materials is very clearly laid out for that.
It's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. For phase one, what is the intended time frame between initialization of the implementation of it and termination of the phase 5 overall work? And the reason I'm asking is with regards to boundary reapplications, the French immersion programs, etc. How quickly can we expect that to be sort of initial?
So some of the timeline is regulated. So the school closure discussion has a requirement that it not be less than 60 days, and it can be extended depending on the complexity of the discussion. The board policy lays out expectations about consultation. If we're having a school closure discussion, we're required to consult with other schools that are affected by the decision. So that can add layers of the consultation as well. The general timeline that's laid out in the appendix is that the board would make a decision tonight, which they have. The consultation would occur to the point where there can be a report tabled in February of 2016 at the board meeting. That's a superintendent's report. There'd be 2 reports, one on the school closure boundary, the second would be on the French immersion discussion. Then those reports would be tabled, and then a decision to be made at the March meeting. So once the final document has been prepared, a 1-month period before the board's asked to make a decision to allow for sufficient dialogue and time to consider the recommendation. So really you're looking at a November through the end of February to achieve the final reports from the superintendent.
That was not major in the question. I apologize for the confusion. Okay. The question was actually, once you've made those determinations,
Oh, sorry. Okay.
how quickly do you foresee starting to actually bring to the real world, into the school board?
Sure.
And then, how long will it be until
Sure. It would depend on the content of the report, right? So if the report identifies it as a strategy, but it has a lot of complexion to it, it may have a longer timeline, it may not. So I think the implementation, it would be hard to pre-conclude that because we need to hear the consultation and know what is going to be recommended and know what or whether the board is going to support it or not. So some components could be September 2016, others may have a different timeline, and I think it really depends on the nature of the discussions and the issue.
But I think, and again, I don't want to presume this is where you're going. What I think you should feel comfortable in, I'll say that on behalf of the board, should any one of these decisions move forward, this is not going to be a note comes out mid-July and says, oh, by the way, you thought you were going here, now you're going there. That's not, that will not happen.
The angle is more, would it be affecting the 2016-17 year for things like the boundary changes and or the emerging programs?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially. Okay.
I'm a parent of a student at Cole Rock Road, and while I've been on many boards myself, I found this a little bit hard to follow. So I'd like to know, like, what my understanding is that there's been a couple of $1 million cut from the budget, and so one of the proposed things is that, are you proposing to, and I may be wrong, but I just want clarification, is the proposal that you will close the Cole Rock Road and join it with Airport Elementary, or that you will add an English component to a Cole Rock Road, or and Airport Elementary. So some of the parents would be sent to Airport Elementary to do the French immersion there, and some of the parents would continue at Cole Rock Road.
So in very broad strokes, and again, presupposing a whole bunch of conversations, we would essentially have 3 dual-track schools, elementary schools in the district. We would have Puntledge, either where it is or moved, Rob Road and Airport. So before I leave, does that help?
And according to where you live in your catchment, you would have no choice about which school you would attend. You would either be sent to Airport Elementary or Rob Road. Or could I say
that would be a variable that would form part of the consultation conversation. So it would be unfair, and I can't say yay or nay to that at this point.
And is there a date set for the consultation? When
Not yet.
be expected?
No, we haven't mapped any of that out because it would have been presumptuous of us to do that in absence of the conversation tonight. Yes.
Just kind of question and wonder if this, this motion that's been approved this evening, it's looking at, the potential closure of certain schools and adjusting boundaries and all that kind of thing, and that's looking at it as that's a real world way of saving money within the system. That's a very obvious way of doing it, and I'm just wondering if in your timelines that you're also looking at other ways of saving money that perhaps maybe doesn't have such a drastic effect on so many different children's, parents, families' lives, because there's probably better ways of achieving the same end. And I didn't hear any desire to facilitate that and make that happen, so I just found that quite concerning.
I think the clearest response I can give is that there's nothing out of scope in terms of other opportunities. The board has agreed to a direction tonight based on the phase 5 items, but that doesn't preclude other conversations that arguably will need to take place as well around where there are opportunities to reinvest where able and to adjust where necessary. So they're not mutually exclusive.
My question is around parents who have an opinion or want to share their opinion. What's the best avenue for having done that? I'm new to Comox, but I've been in education for 15 years, so perhaps my question comes with a little bit of, let me just say this. It would be really important for parents to have a voice, so what's the best way for them to do that? Because I'm not feeling like parents had a chance to be heard here in your discussion, so obviously coming to this meeting isn't the best way to do it. So what is the best way for people who have an opinion to share that?
So as the superintendent mentioned, as we roll out with the consultation process, we will need, and you need to hold us accountable to it, as I'm sure all our partner groups will, that we're exceedingly transparent and open around the opportunities and the multiple opportunities that become available to parents or anyone in our community, connected or not, with the school district to provide input. So, but that isn't mapped out at this point in time. Again, part of it would be a cart before the horse, given that the conversation this evening has only really charted our course to move forward with the consultation.
Okay, and one last quick question. What weight does the community's opinion have when the board makes decisions.
Um,
And I don't mean that disrespectfully.
No,
I'm very curious about, really, does it matter what the community's opinion is? I have no history here. I'm just really curious because I'm new to this whole process. But I wouldn't want people losing sleep over things that maybe...
Yeah, I mean, you know, is it sort of a 50% plus one say yes and we go yes, and or the other way? That's not how it works. What we have the responsibility to do and are accountable to you is to hear and consider everything that comes our way and to account for it as part of our deliberation. And whether that comes from, you know, 100 people over here or 10 people here.
Can I clarify something? Can I just add to that? I think there's a couple pieces here that what might help you as you walk away. The school closure process is the most interesting process the government could ever have designed. And it starts with, we have to actually scare everybody and say, we're considering a school closure process for your school. Where you would have expected us to have much deeper conversations before we even got to that statement, as Trustee McDonald talked about. Just legally, that's not how we're allowed to do it. You have to start with this declaration. The Board of Education is considering the closure of a Cole Puntledge Park. But again, that is simply to start the conversation, and that's a legal piece that we wish we didn't have to do it that way, because it does exactly this. It just frightens folks. What this valley has is a history that proves that no decisions are pre-judged and pre-made. There have been occasions in this valley, just as I arrived, and just previous to that, where schools went through closure processes, and because of the feedback from their communities, those schools were not closed. So when you ask the question about how much does your, that's a valid question. How much does my heartfelt contribution really make? That's the only thing that trustees can actually judge it on, for the most part. And it has, I can't remember, I'm going to ask the Lord Douglas, who's been here forever, how many school closure processes went through...
Two at Courtney Elementary, we didn't close the school at either time.
Twice, yeah.
One at Arden.
Once.
We didn't close that school.
Correct. And Brooklyn, at least I was connected to.
I've done two at Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And then in the end.
And in the end, much later. So the point being is that it's because of the way it's set up. This is simply, we have to state this in order to engage you in a conversation that allows you to tell us what you think about the closure of that particular school. And it doesn't necessarily at all mean that that's where you will end up. And the second clarification is that in this broad spectrum of the Phase 5, as you saw, it is as broad and general as secondary boundary changes on a map that move kids as they go from grade 7 into grade 8 into a different school, to a narrow focus that we were forced to in a school closure. And it really is that broad. Not all of it is driven by budget. In fact, I'm not going to argue with Trustee Coleman because he's my boss. But I would say to you is that for what we've heard consistently from the secondary community and from parents is exactly what we're responding to, which is that there is an inequity amongst the 3 high schools about programming. And a significant inequity in many cases. And so we've been hearing that. That's where the voice of parents was heard. And one of the things we'd like to talk about in this consultation process is what would it look like if we redrew some of these boundaries so that we could level out the capacities at the high schools. We have one at somewhere around 1,200, one that sits between 900 to 960, and one that is at 650 most often. And you can guess which one has the harder time. Where with some boundary shifts we might be able to level that off. But we have to ask you what you think about it, and we have to listen to what you say.
Okay, we'll take another question, and then if there is one, I'll take another 3 questions.
Phase 3, the implement dual track branch immersion program study. Curious, where is that study? It says study complete. Who did that study?
That was actually one that was done 2.5 years ago, and it was a number. We did the numbers on how that would look like. Okay. Right. So Russell, I don't know if you've got it on the website.
It's not on the website, but through the consultation process, when we start making the presentations, the numbers will be what we're presenting.
So, I'm sorry, that was 2.5 years ago?
Well, it was from the numbers we started looking at a tracking over time. the enrollment numbers, both about the request for enrollment into French immersion, and there was no point in looking at creating 3 dual tracks if those schools didn't have the capacity to hold them. That's what the study was, right? So, and that will be part of the consultation. And in terms of the Cole Rob Road, which is the school I'm pretty sure you're representing today, the question is for us to ask you about English stream kids making it a dual track school. No decision's been made. We wanted to make sure that we had, if we were having a conversation about expanding the French immersion program district-wide, did we have 3 sites that could potentially host dual track?
Susan.
I think when Sherry was speaking earlier, she alluded to the fact that this plan somehow has its origins with the board that served from 2008 to 2011, and I believe Trustee Brown and Trustee Hargraves had said this plan had been in works for a long time. So I believe in an honest and transparent process and correct information right from the start. And I was board chair for that term. And I can tell you that the first time I've seen this plan was on your website on Friday night. This has not been in the works for a number of years, like you may understand it to be. So that would be my first point. My second point is that you do well to give Trustee Sheila over here a little extra time. She alluded to a sham process that took place, and that was on the first board I served on. And if you recall, Tom Weber, you were at, I think, some fundraising events for the group that sued the school district at the time. It was a $100,000 price tag for legal fees. So I think you should maybe give her more than 5 or 6 minutes when she's trying to make a point. She may save you some money in the long run.
Is there a question?
Yeah, I had information and a comment and a question for you. And my question is this. I have a big belief that I elect people here so that they can come and listen to what the public has to say about the decision. And I want to be able to directly speak to you. I don't want it filtered through management. I want to speak directly to the board. And I'm guessing that these people are all here this evening because they want to hear what the board has to say. They're not maybe so interested in filtering things through staff. So I want to know, Tom Weber, as the board chair, what you personally plan to do to ensure that your board has an opportunity as a board as a whole to engage with the public, to hear directly from the public what their thoughts are and not receive your consultation through management reports. Thank you for the opportunity to ask you that question.
You're very welcome. Well, I will trust, and I won't speak on behalf of my colleagues, but certainly the expectation is that we are front and center and present during the consultation process, and that information comes to us directly. That we bear witness to that, and we will identify that as the consultation processes unfold.
I just want to confirm that as of 11 o'clock on Friday evening, that long range facilities thing was not up. So it was.
So the plan that's been on our website since 2012 is this document. If you go to our website under district information, there's school district properties, and click on that. It's the bottom document. So this document was approved by the board in October 2012, and it had been about an 18-month generation period to get to this stage. So the actual report has been published since 2012. The document that's in the board package was clearly a document for tonight's meeting. Right, so the plan itself is available on the website.
Question there, thank you.
Hi, I'm Monique Robertson. I'm one of the chairs for Pembridge Farm School. And I guess my question is, why was Pembridge chosen as a school to close? I mean, is it the facility itself is unfit for kids to be in, or is it more to fill up Lake Trail?
Sure. So the facility plan had us looking at pockets of schools, so regions of schools. So East Courtenay would be one of those pockets. So it was a combination of looking at the facility condition, so how old the building is, how much deferred maintenance is on that building. It was a process of looking at what the facility has to offer for educational programming. So Lake Trail School has quite a bit more to offer than a school like Puntledge, for example, shops and whole rec rooms and multi-purpose rooms. So we were looking at all of the facilities. We were also looking at proximity to where the students are living, right? So we have some students that are living in a little more of a rural setting, which is the Arden, and then we've got schools that are more into sort of central Courtenay. So it was an exercise of looking at lots of factors, and that's where the conclusion came that Puntledge was the school to look at a closure, and then relocating the entire building, staff, students, and supplies to the Lake Trail School.
So those details and significantly more need to be part of and will be part of the consultation process. So, I'm going to make a...
When will information be, they're thinking that no specific information be released to the public? So is it going to be before the consultation starts, or is it trickling out during the process?
The specific information on each of the...
Busing, fathering of children in school.
Well, arguably, the interest would be to have it released in advance, but I fully expect, having been part of many public consultation processes, that there will be questions that will come up during the process that will need to be answered and added on. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, the intent is to get as much information out as possible to help inform the good questions that need to come from the public.
And the timeline was?
As soon as it's scheduled, as soon as possible.
Is it talking 4-month consultation period?
Yeah.
60 days.
Not a lot of time.
In the back, and then I'm going to do a motion to
What
adjourn.
about the kids of Lake Trail who parents have chosen and want to send their younger kids to a middle school instead of an overpopulated large school where you have grade 8 kids with grade 12 kids? It's much nicer to have 7, 8, 9s together. I know you shake your head, but
No, I'm not shaking my head. I'm saying that's super important that come forward. Like super important
Seems
that.
to care. Everyone's all about the French immersion, which I have a child in French immersion as well, but I have a child in middle school that can care a hell of a lot more about what she is going to be subjected to at her young age.
Super
Not saying
important.
bad about grade 12, I've got a grade 11 as well, but.
Very important that come forward. Absolutely. So this is not, and again, people will choose to accept it or not. This isn't about talking us in or out of anything. This is about us being part of a conversation with the public and hopefully coming to a wise decision. So, motion to adjourn. Second. Carried. All those in favor? And we're adjourned. Thank